Artistic Gamer 7 and welcome back to another video here on the channel. Time to be continuing on some more Sims 4 Occult discussions. So if you are chiming in randomly to this, because I know that it's been sort of a gap since the last time that, well, not since the last recording got uploaded, but technically since I actually sort of talked about this, and technically even for that one, big time before the first ones before it. So basically, it's where this is like a little mini series that I'm doing where I take occults that either have shown up in some form or way in The Sims or ones that people on Twitter suggested that they would sort of like to see. And I took some of the most popular ones or the ones that I thought could be interesting. And actually, I'm going to be sort of talking about them. And feel free to comment down below some things that if you have like some ideas and stuff for these different occults as well. Definitely feel free to. This is sort of like a discussion for everyone. And if a certain occult gets a lot of discussion down in the comments below, I'll definitely make like a little second video for it, almost like going back and talking about it, so mentioning some of y'all's comments and things like that, and some other ideas that y'all came up with that I did not. With this particular one, I actually technically recorded a long time ago, as well as the two previous ones, werewolves and zombies. So those ones, I did go ahead and post them as is, but they were recorded an extremely long time ago, and there was a few packs that were not out at the time, or I at least knew about them, but didn't know exactly how much was going to be going into detail with them. And as I was editing the Fairies one, I realized that it would be better to just redo that one with, there were some different thoughts that I had, and also just in general some of the things that I mentioned. It would fit better now knowing what I do know compared to when I made those, but I just did decide to go ahead and post the werewolves and zombie ones anyway. But now we are going to be talking about fairies, as you could probably have already told in the little title thing. So fairies in the Sims 4 and slash pixies, because some people sort of refer to them as the same thing. They're not technically the same thing, but at the same time for Sims, I would just go and plainly say that they're the same thing, because you don't want to overcomplicate it. But you could always, if you as the player could play your sim that is a fairy or pixie more towards one or the other, but there are certain differences. The biggest difference in between a fairy and a pixie is pixies can fly but don't have wings, while fairies do have wings. So that could be an interesting option to give, like you don't actually have to have wings, but have the powers of the fairy, so that you can, again, play the story as if you're a pixie or a fairy. Also, both of them are very more mischievous type creatures, but from what I read and what my understanding and how I sort of interpret it is that pixies tend to be mischief almost in, not necessarily a negative way, but, you know, sort of going that way. So, like, their mischief and pranks could be slightly harmful or not as, like, little light and innocent versus a fairy's would be. So, like, they still would, like, pull little pranks, but they'd be, like, more harmless ones that really wouldn't make a big deal for most Sims unless you have a very sensitive, touchy Sim. So that's like some of the differences that I could see in between them. But I would love for fairies to make a comeback. Technically in Savant, I think Savant Grelade, there are these little creatures that if you pay attention and you scroll up really close to them, they actually do look like they're meant to be fairies or pixies. They giggle and they fly around, make little magical noises, so they definitely seem like they're supposed to be fairies or pixies. But they have wings, so I'd say fairies. But I want playable fairies. I do like one thing that Sims 3 did some of the occults really well, and then some of them not as well. Like zombies and werewolves, I felt like were lacking so much, and zombies, like I had stated in my zombie one, I'm pretty sure they wasn't playable at all. They were just a thing that happened. I think something could happen to your sim, but it wasn't permanent, and I can't remember fully. Like, I just didn't pay attention to the zombies enough that I even remember fully what they did. I just know that they randomly would come out of the ground. So, and then werewolves, I didn't enjoy playing them, so I definitely, like, they were some of the ones lacking in Sims 3 from what I remember. I didn't play all the occults in Sims 3 because I didn't get all the packs like I've been doing for Sims 4, but still, But as for fairies, that was one of the cults that I really did like, and I think they did well, and I would love for them to bring a lot of that back. I like the fact that you could have a small form and then also the regular size sim form, so it easily made them very easy to be playable, to be a regular sim, but you can use your powers and turn little, like you normally typically think of fairies and pixies. So I definitely would like that to come back. I also can't remember if there was like little fairy houses. I almost want to say that there was like some little fairy house that when you were in the small form that you could fly into. I would almost really like to see a way that you can almost see into those houses. Like, either like, whether it has to be like a small loading screen or something like that. Like, you can almost go into the little pixie house and they have like a whole build and buy like section that gives you all these little magical looking items and all these fairy stuff that are meant specifically for these fairy houses that are like the little houses. So if you had like a household and one of them was a fairy, they can have their own little tiny house that they could go and be separate from everyone else, but they also can still come out of the little fairy house and grow up to regular size and interact with the other regular sims or the other occult sims. So I definitely would like to see like little houses type things like that, and definitely a lot of the little mischief magic and stuff come back with the fairies. I think, from what I remember with Sims 3, I think fairies was one of the like best done ones. I remember I still liked witches and vampires, and I definitely will say I still like vampires in Sims 4. I feel like the witches, aka spellcasters in Sims 4, are slightly lacking to some degree, which is sort of sad. I feel like most of the occults are lacking to some degree, except for vampires. I think vampires has so far been the only occult that they've fully done that I really like how they did it. But that could be another discussion for another day. As for today, we are talking about fairies. But yeah, I would definitely like the option to be able to choose like having different wings and being able to have like the wings have different colors and sparkles off of them. It's basically a lot. Sims 3 did fairies well, and I would like that to come back. One of the things that I would like to add is that fairy house, being able to see into the little fairy house, and maybe even having like really tiny lots. And like if a world was to come with this, most of the lots be really tiny, and you can set multiple fairy houses on it if you have like a big household of fairies, but it's such a tiny lot that all you need is the little tiny fairy houses. And I'd like different options, like maybe some sitting on rocks and some sitting up on sticks, or some inside of trees and stuff like that. Like, I would really like those like different options for like the little tiny fairy houses that maybe they go into and stuff. I definitely think they should have some sort of limit to their power, but maybe not so much as like a spellcaster, because like the spellcasters, they can overcharge. But when you think about fairies, they are like technically in like lore and things like that, they're basically just born from magic in general, so they're not necessarily a being that, at least in most lores that I know of, they come to being from magic, not so much born like a normal person would be, or even like most of the cults. But obviously for the Sims purposes, I definitely think there should be like be able to be fairy children and stuff like that. And like I've said with like the mermaids and some of the other occults, I don't get why the kids have no sign of being able to like show their occult whatsoever. Like, yeah, I get if you have to you want to limit what kid occults can do compared to what the teen and adult versions of them can do. I get if we limit that. Like, yeah, maybe not make the ability for a vampire child to go bite the neck of some adult, but at least let them be able to eat plasma fruit, or like they have to have some sort of situation like that, or something. Like, they still have like slight irritation to the sun. Like, they can go out in it more than like their parents can because they haven't grown into their full powers, but they still react to it. The mermaids still little kids, let them turn and get a tail, because especially for mermaids, that really doesn't make sense to me that a mermaid child is born with, our toddler is born without a tail, because technically the way a mermaid is, it never was technically a full-on human. Like a vampire technically was partially full-on human at one point. You get what I'm saying. Like the kids are a little bit odd because they're technically born a vampire, unless one of the parents is a human, then it has a chance to be a regular person. But still, with the mermaids and how mermaids actually are, you would think that they would always have the tail, technically. Like the tail just, they wouldn't just randomly grow into it. I guess you can say there's like some magical thing that the mermaid thing doesn't work until they reach a certain age. I've seen movies that are based off of that, like they don't get that mermaid ability till they turn a certain age, and I guess that could work, but to me it still doesn't make sense. So yeah, I would really prefer fairy children to actually have at least some fairy abilities. Maybe let them have wings, but the wings are a lot smaller than what they would be on the teen or the adult. Stuff like that. Like some way to still distinguish, oh yes, this is a fairy child, this is a fairy toddler, but they're not a full-blown fairy yet because, or they haven't came into their full abilities yet because they are a toddler and a child. But you can still tell that they are a fairy. I would also like with the fairies to have something similar to the vampires, or in between vampires and the spellcasters, where you have like a little thing that you can pull up and you can pick certain abilities that they can have, and maybe even have it to where you can lean more towards like full-on mischief versus like little jokes mischief. Take the what is it? Is it the Hijinks and Humor Festival? Take that pass. Joker versus mischief. So harmless little jokes and pranks versus potentially not so harmless jokes and pranks. So like voodoo doll versus ha ha funny. Like that sort of thing. Like you could maybe pick one of the paths, but once you go to a path, you technically have to stick on that path unless there's like some magical potion that you can make or buy from like what is it? The aspiration, not the aspiration, rewards store or whatever, with your little aspiration points and all that stuff that you get from your aspiration and your whims. Satisfaction points. Those things. Yeah. Like maybe there's like a little potion that you can buy from there, or a special area plant that you gotta find to make it. Something along that. I think I would rather be able to make it, especially with like knowing fairies. They're more likely in a foresty, wooded area with these plants. So I definitely would think making it would be a better option, but if you don't like the path you're going on, you can stop, and maybe somewhere have an in-between path where they don't want to joke, they're just like this like all around good fairy in a way or something, like where they don't really want to be mischief or jokestery. They just want to use their powers to maybe help people and not so much joke around and pull pranks. I don't know. Something like that. Maybe have a third option, but I personally like at least the two options like you can strain for to go towards, and one leans more towards the light-hearted jokestery side, and then the other towards the a little bit darker mischief side in a way. So, sort of being able to play around with that sort of option I think would be like quite a bit of fun, but that's honestly sort of the main points, because I really think Sims 3 did fairies pretty well. Being able to have just like these little fun little powers. None of them are like, I don't want them to be like overblown, full on crazy, but like be able to temporarily like turn a person into something, or be able to make their drink spill on them from a distance. Some like little tiny things like that. But then maybe have some that's every once in a while, like maybe you get an option to refill one of your needs or something like every so often. And like just little simple powers like that, but maybe be able to pick from them from some sort of like little chart thing, whatever. Like the vampires, even like with Get Famous, like the celebrity, like something like that, where you can get to pick down these different paths and do stuff like that. I definitely really think that would work out really well with the fairies. And in all honesty, like, part of me thinking about how they could do packs for some of these, realized that's something I didn't really go into with, like, uh, zombies especially, but I don't think I did it with werewolves either. I think there could be a full-on blown expansion pack for some of the ones that is, like, upcoming, and, like, add them sort of all together. Fairies would be one of them. It's not like a supernatural necessarily, but more of leaning towards fantasy. So like a fantasy pack where you get like a magical, fanciful sort of world, and like the different neighborhoods have like are more suited for whatever occults are added in this. I know with some of them I have thought of coming up. I definitely think fairies would be a good one for this, and at least one other big occult along with some small occults. Y'all get into that a little bit later, but yeah, it's sort of like a fantasy pack with adding the fairies. So like all these different like fantasy magical like items. I definitely think a more woodsy, foresty area would look better. Something similar to Savant Glade, but on a much bigger scale, and not like all pink like necessarily all the time. Maybe like where the fairies are, that area is more toned to that pinky purple tone all the time, and then like maybe there's another area where one of these other occults is at and stuff like that. Definitely would not include werewolves and zombies in with this like fantasy pack. I think personally I don't know what pack necessarily zombies could come in unless it was like just a game pack about like sort of adding like for maybe like a Halloween type theme, but not necessarily full on Halloween. But yeah, so I don't know exactly how those could have gone into a pack. Easily probably could do like a werewolf type thing, and maybe even add in like other creatures along with them, but like wolf type creatures and things like that, like those types. But do something similar to vampires with the werewolves. I can easily say you could do something like that. But yeah, with fairies, I definitely would like to almost include them into this big idea of a fantasy expansion pack that will include some stuff that I will talk about in the series later on. But yeah, let me know down in the comments below your thoughts on fairies / pixies. Do you really want them to come to the game? Do you like what I sort of talked about? Is there something you would add or something you would slightly change? For the most part, I really do think Sims 3 like I was saying, Sims 3 Fairies did it pretty well. So I definitely would like that option to come back, but just with a little expanded detail maybe onto them. But we'll have to see when if that ever is an option. I really think they're not going to bring too many more occults in. Sadly, like a lot of people do like the occults, but I do know the majority of people don't use them as much as like I use them and as like I like them, and then a few other people tend to. I usually hear the stuff from the build and buy and even the cast objects are their favorite parts about the pack, and not so much the occults that come with them, which sort of makes me sad because I do really like having occults. I like having these different Sims in the game because it's like a mix of bringing non-reality and reality together and blending it to where it almost makes sense. So I sort of like that little fusion of the two, just because when I play games I don't like full-on realism in games, but I do like that bit of realism just so that it sort of makes you feel like you could easily be in that position or so, if you get what I'm saying. I also like the full-on like fantasy going crazy also aspect in games, but I feel like games are not meant to be totally realistic, so that's why I'm like, I don't want just full-on realism. So, but yeah, anyway, so yeah, let me know down in the comments below. Definitely would like some discussions going on, would like to hear y'all's thoughts as well on this whole matter, and whether or not you really would like fairies. I think fairies would stand a higher chance of being wanted in than zombies, definitely, but even possibly werewolves. So we'll see. But yeah, definitely like to know what y'all think about that. I will be continuing this series on, so hope you're liking this series so far and enjoying sort of the little ideas and thinking about what would happen if these occults ever did make it in and what stuff you would like to see come from them. I definitely would like to see objects for like fairies as well. The build and buy, I think, for that actually would be really, really amazing, so that would be like exciting for me. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. My playlist to the occult discussions is down in the description below, so if you missed some videos or you think you're behind, you can easily click on that. It also should be at the end of the video in a few moments, so you can easily just click on that playlist as well. Definitely make sure you hit subscribe if you're not already, and the little notification bell, and hit that lovely like button if you enjoyed this video. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!